we're having a very star-studded cast after Dr. Stephen Cohen talking about delicate issues about India's foreign policy and Indo-US relations. We have
I'm leaving this.
Bob McDonald, Chief Operating Officer
I've got to leave right away.
the US giant Procter & Gamble, talking to us about innovation, the central theme of this whole event, Inspire, Innovate and Transform. As Dr. Cohen was mentioning it, it is American corporations who are today driving Indo-US relationships, showing that maybe it's economics and business that's really driving politics. And who else, who is better to talk about innovation in this environment than the Chief Operating Officer of Procter & Gamble, Bob McDonald. And I'd request Bob to come on stage. I'd request Sharad Naru to come and formally introduce Bob McDonald to the audience and then ask him to start this address. Sharad. You have the
Yes.
and then we have the Q&A sort of.
Yes. No problem.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sharad Naru, a volunteer of the PanIIT movement, just as you all are. I have the distinct pleasure this morning of introducing my first boss after my MBA, Mr. Robert McDonald, the Chief Operating Officer of Procter & Gamble. I have many fond memories of working for Bob. He will of course tell you when you ask him that no, I work for Sharad. That's just his sign of his humility and support for the people that worked for him and with him. And his major trademark, if I'll tell you, is his ability to look after people even when they create trouble or are in trouble themselves. And I recall one such incident when I first joined Procter & Gamble. I was put under his team, which was a brand group of Cascade, the US's largest dishwashing detergent. It's I think a $500 million brand in those days. And the promotional spending budget was a $40 million budget. And he had asked me to manage the implementation of that budget. And this fresh MBA, who, as a typical, IITian, last minute preparation for exams and that kind of thing, signed off this huge contract for a national couponing event and innocuously ticked off a mark which said 40% or 25%. So I said 40% is better. I signed off on it. It turned out that was a $2 million blunder. And Bob was very cool about it when it happened, because the vendor refused to back off from that commitment we had made to him. And he managed to resell that extra couponing coverage to another brand. And his primary remark at the end of it was, what could I have done better to not have this repeated? How could he have trained me better or worked with me better? So that just tells you the way he worked with people even when they're in trouble and how they get them out of trouble. The second thing is, Bob is equally capable of also putting people in trouble. He might disagree, but he does. So it's one of these social evenings. We had invited Bob and his wife Diane to come for dinner at home in Cincinnati. And Bob disappeared for about 5 to 10 minutes into the single bedroom apartment that we had, because the bathroom was in the bedroom, connected to the bedroom. And after a while I just walked in and discovered that he was fixing our bedside table that had broken down because my wife Meena's fat cousin had sat on it and broken it. And I had mentioned it to Bob the previous day. He had carried a set of tools in his pocket and he fixed it. Now that night after Bob and Diane left, I was in deep trouble because, this is of course Meena's reaction. This is what IITians are all about, all talk and no action. You guys, you talk about engineering, but you can't do any action. So that's Bob for you. So he can get you into trouble, so just watch out. Just want to tell you that Bob, India connection, just very faithfully, I guess, goes back to the time that he joined Procter & Gamble. Because in Procter & Gamble, he's known as Ram. Now you might wonder, what is this India connection there? It's just his initials, R-A-M, and that's how he signs all his memos and his letters. And of course, his second Indian connection was me working for him. And the point I want to make is, this is his first trip to India. And he really means it when he says that it was, I'm very honored to say that he remembers our working together, and he made a very great effort to come here despite the situation of the Bombay scenario, etc. I think it's a true mark to his relationship to his people, his sense of values, and again I want to thank him from all of the PanIIT Association. Bob is, I just don't want to go into the litany of accolades that Bob, we can talk about Bob, except to say that he's also on the board of Xerox Corporation. He comes from a very elite institution where he did his engineering, which I doubt if many Indians or Indians of Indian or people of Indian origins have attended. He attended the West Point Academy in the US where he did his engineering. He has an MBA from the University of Utah. He's also an expert on Arctic warfare and desert warfare, if you ever need such support. Today, Bob's talk is going to be about innovation and how does one coax a large corporation to innovate, which I believe is in itself innovation. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Shiraz for that very kind introduction. I guess the story about fixing that bedside table is once you're an engineer, you're always an engineer. So as he said, I studied engineering when I went to West Point. It's really a pleasure for me to be here today. I agreed enthusiastically to join this gathering for a couple of reasons. First, as Shiraz said, he asked me, and we've been friends for almost 30 years now. He was on the organizing committee, worked with me at P&G in the early 1980s, and we've stayed in touch ever since. I have a tremendous respect for Sarath and Meena, his wife, their family, and I was honored by his invitation, so I really had to come. Second,